Okay, here we go. This is what we have all been waiting for. Charlton Heston as Moses.
Behold his mighty hand!
There you go. Hey, that was not bad for 1956, you know. So one of the things that you're learning, I hope, in studying scripture is the important stories. And the important stories are repeated throughout the Bible, and they are commented upon and interpreted in a way throughout the Bible. For instance, you're probably totally confused because you've probably never read this in the Bible, and we have not gotten to this in our own course here in the Psalm 95. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did at Meribah, as you did that day at Massa in the desert, where your fathers tested and tried me, though they had seen what I did. Well, what on earth is this about? Well, you can look at the footnotes here. Meribah means quarreling, Massa means testing, but that's really not what it's about, because actually it's about something that we will read later, which happens to the Jews while they are going through the wilderness. And if you haven't read it or heard that story or been paying attention at Mass, because it's probably occasionally read at Mass, you wouldn't know what that means. But I mean, that's why you're learning. However, today, in the book of wisdom, you do know what the author of wisdom is talking about. Because the author of wisdom is saying, he's talking to God, you furnished the flaming pillar, a guide on the unknown way, and the mild sun for an honorable migration. Remember, he's with the Jews as a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day to lead them out of Egypt. And then he's talking about the Egyptians. For they deserved to be deprived of light and imprisoned by darkness. They had kept your children confined, through whom the imperishable light of the law was to be given to the world. Now, here he's explaining two of the plagues that were visited upon the Egyptians. One of them, remember, was a very thick darkness. The author of wisdom is saying there's a reason for that. In a sense, he's saying what St. John later says, that the light has come into the world, but people prefer darkness rather than light because their deeds were dark. The Egyptians were resisting the true light, the light of reason, the light of love, the light of Christ, even though they don't know, even the Jews don't know it's the light of Christ at this point. And in hardening their hearts, they choose to live in a kind of darkness. And therefore, God gives them a punishment that fits the crime in one of the plagues, the plague of darkness. But there's more, and we find out once again, because sometimes we think, well, that's a little harsh, that all the firstborn were killed, and that's what gets Pharaoh to release the Jews, at least for a while. But he explains this: when they, the Egyptians, determined to put to death the infants of the holy ones, remember, Pharaoh, like Herod, wanted all the babies to be killed, meaning the boys, so that the Israelites would not have a military force and be able to rebel. When they determined to put to death the infants of the holy ones, meaning the infants of the Israelites, and when a single boy had been cast forth and then saved, when Moses was cast forth by being put in the basket, cast forth upon the water, pulled out of the water and saved, as a reproof, you carried off a multitude of their children and made them perish all at once in the mighty water. He's saying, since the Egyptians were killing the babies of the Israelites. And since Moses was saved from the water, two things then happened. There was the plague of the slaughter of the firstborn, and there was the drowning of the Egyptians in the Red Sea. Now, we'll get to that tomorrow. And apparently that scene is also in the movie with Charlton Heston, though I haven't seen it for quite some time. But as you know, you probably know this part. I mean, we read, at least the setup for it today, Pharaoh still has second thoughts. After all these plagues, and he's let the Israelites go, the Hebrews are out. They're on their way out of Egypt, and he says, what have I done? I'm going to go get them and bring them back. And he sends a force against them, who will, spoiler alert, be drowned in the waters that are parted for the Hebrews. But do you see how this fits together? It fits together in that the punishment fits the crime in these plagues and miracles that are besetting the Egyptians. You don't realize these things if you don't get yourself steeped in Scripture, Old Testament and New. Then you start to see how it all fits together. And then you may be less likely to say things like, oh, you know, that was pretty harsh, God. Killing all their firstborn, that's kind of harsh. Drowning all the army when they were chasing the Israelites, it's a little harsh. We have to see how it's fitting. And it makes you wonder what's going to happen to us in a society that now is saying not only that abortion is legal, but that it's an actual positive good, that it's health care. And in a society where you have a leader in Congress threatening Supreme Court justices publicly if they curb abortion rights, you've got to wonder, since we reap what we sow, and karma is not just a word from another religion, we see it in life and in Scripture, we've got to wonder what's in store for us.